Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to whoever might be listening, and welcome to the American Polar Society's Voices from the Ice live presentation on Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us this morning. I would like to tell you a little bit about the American Polar Society and then introduce our guest today. The American Polar Society is a 90-year-old organization. We have been publishing continuously a journal that's called the Polar Times, which goes to our members. Our mission with that journal and with everything we do is to support anybody who is a polar passionate person. And if you are sitting here with us today, I'm sure that's who you are. So do come and join us. Today, we're very lucky to have Esther Horvath with us. She is a photographer and is a polar photographer. And you may have seen her in different places like the National Geographic or winning awards for her work. And unlike some other polar photographers, she focuses in on people. Esther has been on the ice, worked in polar regions for many years, and she has been documenting the scientific research and other components of the Arctic as well. Many of her photographs, of course, are award-winning, but I think one of the most exciting things, and maybe she'll correct me, but one of the most exciting things is her recent experience with the National Geographic effort to look for, and which they did find, Sir Ernest Shackleton's ship, the Endurance. Congratulations to your team, Esther, and welcome to Voices from the Ice.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. As you contacted me last week, I just returned from Antarctica. I was very happy to receiving your email and invitation, and I'm very happy to meet everyone who is here or later watching this talk about the polar regions. As you mentioned, I'm a photographer and I work for 10 years now in the Arctic and Antarctica. I documented 28 scientific expeditions. My focus is on scientists and telling the stories of scientists who are oftentimes hidden in the shadows. And my goal is to bring their work into light and show what they are doing and also their findings. And since I'm a photographer, I studied at the International Center of Photography in New York. And since I studied and during also my studies, it was always my goal to tell inspiring stories, and those inspiring stories are focusing now on the polar regions, and I'm very happy to share my work today with everyone. And if you allow me, I share my screen.
Well, if you can wait just a moment on that, I am really curious about what first took you to the polar regions. What attracted you to going north or south?
So I was connected to the polar regions already as a little girl. I was born in Hungary, and there was a scientific magazine always starting with the same intro, men marching in Antarctica. And I was fascinated by this scene as they were marching in the snowstorm. And I always wanted to feel this freezing cold on my face, on my hands, and the snow on my face. And I always dreamed about, but I was a little girl in Hungary, and actually still behind the Iron Curtain, where we were not even allowed to travel outside the Iron Curtain. So for me, it was like another planet, but already as a child, I was dreaming about it. And as I finished my studies in New York, I got an assignment from Audible magazine, from Sabine Meyer, who is the director of photography at the magazine. And I received my very first assignment going to the polar regions. And that was exactly 10 years ago, going to the Arctic Ocean. And as I was there on this assignment, I remember this 6-year-old girl who dreamed about the polar regions. And I was just so grateful to experiencing what I always dreamed about. And on that expedition, I decided that this is exactly what I want to do. this is exactly what I want to dedicate my work to, that I want to work in the polar regions. I want to work with scientists and raise awareness about the changing polar regions.
It's wonderful what comes from our childhoods, isn't it? That's terrific. Thank you for sharing that part of your story with us. If you would like, for our viewers, Esther has put together a slideshow, a presentation, and is going to tell us some stories, I think, both from the Arctic and the Antarctic. Is that correct?
I will do like just a little tiny about what I do, and then I would like to talk about the endurance.
Okay. I think everybody will be very excited to hear that. Okay.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, though, I'd just like to say a big thank you to both Seth and Bill, who are behind the scenes for us right now. They are both board members of the American Polar Society, and Seth does our technical work, and Bill he's supporting everything we do. So he's always around. And so thank you to you, gentlemen. And Seth, if you'd like to hand over the screen share to Esther, that'd be fantastic. Thank you, Esther. And I'll wait with any questions until you're finished.
Thank you so much. So I share my screen now. Yes. So I think you can see my screen. So I'm Esther Horvath again. I'm a photographer for the Alfred Wegener Institute. It's the German Polar Institute, working in polar with polar and marine research, and I'm also National Geographic Explorer. As a photographer, my goal is that I'm using photography as a tool to communicate about scientific research in a form of exhibitions, books. I really enjoy to do talks, but of course publications and beautiful outlets like the National Geographic or the New York Times. So my goal is to reach audience in every age, in every sphere, and that I can talk about scientific findings from the polar expeditions which I'm participating. My very first one was in the Arctic Ocean, exactly 10 years ago, what I mentioned, as an assignment for the Audubon magazine. And I was here on the US Coast Guard icebreaker Healy, and standing here, and as I remember the moment as I took this picture, that was the moment when I really decided that this is exactly what I want to do. I want to work in the polar regions. I want to work with scientists and raise awareness about this beautiful, for me, the most beautiful environment of the planet, and unfortunately the fastest changing one. I started to work for Alfred Wegener Institute in 2019. I moved from New York to Germany, and where I'm also based now. And one of the expeditions, what I'm following with Alfred Wegener Institute, is the Icebird expeditions. It's a very unique scientific expedition where scientists fly with an airplane built in 1942. You can see the airplane in the background, and they measure the sea ice thickness. This campaign happens twice a year, and scientists know now that over the past 25 years, the Arctic Ocean sea ice thickness in the Central Arctic Ocean and Franz Strait decreased by 25%. These are the summer measurements when the sea ice extent is the lowest. Recently, just actually 1 week ago, or 10 days ago, I returned from the Antarctica, and here I am with scientist Simon Lisowski from Alfred Wegener Institute. He's a seabird expert and researcher, and I was there on Malizia Explorer with scientists, and our goal was to reaching Danger Islands, which is now a protected area on ASPA, an Antarctic Special Protected Area, and with the goal, with the ultimate goal to extend this protection to the waters. And with Simon, I documented the work of Simon and also other scientists. And here Simon working with the Gen 2 penguins and monitoring their health. One of the most special expedition I did was the Mosaic expedition on board of Polarstern with Alfred Wegener Institute. I was in the polar darkness for 3.5 months, very close to the North Pole during the winter time, in the polar night, which means 24 hours of darkness. I was already in love with the Arctic and with the polar regions, but during this expedition, I also deeply fell in love with the darkness. And during this expedition, I took a photograph of two polar bears, which won the World Press Award, which was for me, of course, like a beautiful and one of the most beautiful awards I received so far in my career. And during this expedition, I decided that I want to continue my work in polar night. And with African Institute, I traveled to New Horizon, where the African Institute has, together with the French Institute base, it's called the French-German Arctic Research Base, AVIPEV. And since 2019, for 6 years, I'm traveling there over and over again and documenting the research happening there, especially during the polar night. And I also started to work on a portrait series, which called Women of Arctic Science. And I document female researchers and staff who works there in the polar night. And it's a portrait series which has been exhibited in New York, recently in Oslo, in Germany, in Hungary, and I'm still bringing this work to many places. It was also published in the National Geographic, and in 3 weeks, I'm traveling back to Svalbard because last year I won a National Geographic Wayfinder Award. And with the help of this award, I'm traveling now to Svalbard to create a short documentary film in the polar night, documenting the research there. But the reason for our meeting today is an expedition going to Antarctica, which happened in 2022, when the ship of Sir Ernest Shackleton was found, the Endurance. And during this expedition, I constantly felt the connection between the past and the present, and I constantly felt somehow that Shackleton and his team is somehow around us, and we had many magical similarities, or many magical facts. Like, we arrived to the search area in Antarctica in the Weddell Sea on the birthday of Shackleton on 15th of February. Endurance, before it got crashed by the sea ice in Weddell Sea, looked like this beautiful sailing vessel. It's a picture of Frank Hurley. And this is how it looked like. But just a few days before it sank, this is one of the last images was taken from Endurance, and it looked like a pile of woods, just a completely crashed vessel. So as the search began, that's what we expected to find, just piles of woods. The research and the search started immediately as we arrived to the search area. Scientists and the expedition leaders confined and created a map which they thought has to be a search box or a search area where the ship must be located. And the search happened with the underwater unmanned vehicle, this yellow equipment or this yellow vehicle, and it was named Ellie. And Ellie was sent down to 3,300 meter depth for 8 hours, searching, and then it was taken back on deck for recharge. Then it was sent back again to search, always in this 8 hours, being down, searching, coming back for 3 hours. And I was alone as a photographer on the ship, and I know that I cannot miss the moment when the ship is found. So I adjusted my sleeping rhythm to Ellie. So I only slept when Ellie was on deck charging, and in the second when she went back to the water, I was awake and I was on the working deck waiting for the good news that we found Endurance. During every single expedition, I'm very interested, of course, for the scientific work, and that's what I'm documenting. But there is also a very important aspect what I'm interested about, life on board and what is happening in the background. And here we can see Dean, he was a cadet, And in his cabin, you could get a tattoo. He was a tattoo artist. If he was not working on a deck, he was a tattoo artist. And he told me that I can get an endurance on my arm if I want. I refused it. Maybe I will regret it, but he was kind to offer me that. Some people got very creative because there were also, of course, many waiting times. And here we can see a helicopter pilot creating cards for playing. We had a spiritual healer as well on our cruise, Sim, who was also a cook. But every single evening, he conducted a spiritual ritual at 10 p.m. in her room, praying that we find endurance. And every evening, she called the bridge and asked the bridge if they can turn off the fire alarm in her room, because she lit a little fire in her room. I don't know if you are a captain of a ship, this is what you want to hear, that someone lit fire in her own cabin, but she was allowed to do it, and she was allowed to do her prayers. And I was really honored that I could witness it and I could document her evening, everyday evening ritual. We had a lot of similarities with the Shackleton's expedition, but there was one absolute difference. We had women on board because during the time of Shackleton and also other explorers, women were not allowed in polar exploration. And during Shackleton's expedition, 3 women desperately wanted to join, but they were not allowed to join. And it was a big difference. We had great women on board, like Carla. She was from South Africa, from the meteorological, responsible for meteorological measurements. We had Timber Lichtle. She was also a cadet, maybe one day a captain of the vessel. And we had Sim here in the kitchen. As I mentioned, she was the cook. Short in our expedition, actually just 5 days after the search started at 3 p.m. I was awake because Ellie was down in the water, so I had to be awake. At 3 p.m. we get the most amazing news that we found the ship, that we found Endurance, and immediately on the working deck a big celebration happened. And everyone on the vessel was woken with a loudspeaker. The captain woke everyone up, that delivering the great news that we found the Endurance. Immediately, the crew decorated the ship. This is our dining room. And it was like a big festive moment. Everyone very joyful and very happy. But Ellie was sent down again, because as Ellie found Endurance, it was the last moment before taking her up again to recharge. So it was just a quick peek look. And as she was sent down again, it turned out it was not Endurance. It was literally just some piles of wood. So it was a big disappointment for everyone after this big celebration and a cheerful feeling on the vessel. And the search continued. The search continued in the roughest conditions, also during the night. And the tension grew on the vessel every single day, because we were running out of the time. Here we can see the management of the expedition leaders, John Shears in the middle. And it was just like this tension just started to grow on the vessel every single day. And the search continued. Ellie was sent down for 8 hours, searching for the vessel. Ellie was sent back again to recharge and sent down again in this rhythm. And I documented every single time when she was sent down and came back, and all the work was happening. But I continued to be interested also what was happening on board. And in this moment, as I photographed Dean was not only a cadet and a tattoo artist, but he was also a hairdresser, and he cut the hair of every single person on board who wanted to have a very short haircut. And as I was here and photographing him and his little hair studio, I could hear on my radio that the two expedition leader was called to the control room. GC and Nico was called to the control room, and I never heard that before on the radio, that they have to go to the control room, both of them. And I knew immediately that something is happening, that if both of them has to go to the control room where Ellie was controlled, something is happening. And I was rushing there to see what is happening. And as I arrived there she was. We found Endurance. And I remember the moment when I saw the vessel on the screen. I got goosebumps. I had water in my eyes, wanted to flow down on my face, and I felt very emotional seeing her, and especially in her beauty, because nobody expected to see Endurance in such a good shape. We thought it will be literally a pile of wood, as we saw it on Frank Hurley's photographs of one of the very last one. But it was not the case. It was in her beauty and visible, and you could read Endurance as it is shown on the screen. Everyone was, of course, extremely happy, and another most beautiful thing what happened, that Endurance was found on the 100-year anniversary of Shackleton's funeral. So that was also something really magical. On the way home, we stopped at South Georgia Island, where Shackleton died and was buried. And we delivered the great news for him that we found his ship. And we had a beautiful celebration, a memorial at the graveyard, also very emotional. So this is the story I wanted to share with you. And yeah, I'm just very grateful that I could be a part of this expedition and I could document it. It was published in National Geographic. There is a book about it, Endurance. There is a film about it by National Geographic, Endurance, and it was also the cover of National Geographic last year.
Well, thank you so very, very much. It has been in the news a lot lately, and to have lived it as you have, what a privilege in life that must have been. That first viewing, I can understand the tears. It makes complete sense. What a great presentation, Esther. Thank you so much. It's really, I just always love hearing the behind the scenes stories, and even the haircut and the tattoo artist. I mean, it's just life goes on for everybody, even though science is being done. And yeah, I mean, wow, it was all really wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. We do have a few questions, and I have a million, but we'll start with a question that came in from a viewer. Um, it says, when looking for Shackleton's Endurance, were there any particular challenges that you needed to overcome? And you may have actually hinted on that in the presentation, but I would be curious what the answer might be.
So for me as a photographer, the biggest challenge is on every single expedition, the lack of sleep.
Oh.
And during this expedition, it was a 6 weeks expedition. Of course, we had like traveling time in it, but for me, the biggest challenge was the lack of sleep, because I literally only slept when Ellie was on the deck. And in the moment when she went in and she was underwater, I was awake, because I didn't want to miss the moment. And I did not miss the moment. I didn't miss the moment when she was almost found at 3 a.m. in the morning. And I didn't miss the moment when she was found. And every other group, like every single group on the ship, they worked in shifts, like a 12-hour work, 12-hour rest and sleep. I didn't have that, because there was not a second photographer. So I was a team alone. So that was for me the biggest challenge.
I'm curious, and you may have said it and I've missed it. How long did it take to recharge the batteries?
Approximately 3 hours.
That's a short nap for you.
That's a very short sleep, yes.
Oh, now I see why that was a challenge. Oh my goodness. Um, of all, besides the viewing, the in the end, seeing that image you just showed us, was there one particular thing that really stood out that you carry with you? I know that that's probably going to be in your heart forever, that view, but something about this expedition, logistics of it, or anything that just really, I don't know, spoke to you, that or made you think, I need to work on that, or I don't know, just something.
For me, the connection to Shackleton and
Mm,
the connection to his to the past expedition. We
mm,
talked about him and his expedition so often, like every day, and we compared our expedition to his. And we've been on the sea ice, and we just imagined like how they survived on the sea ice in these rough conditions what they had, and it was. I still cannot imagine how he did it and how they did it. And for me, he is a true hero in polar exploration. He had three expeditions. He did not reach his final goal with none of it because the first one he had to turn back from the South Pole, or he decided to turn back from the South Pole before reaching the South Pole. The second was endurance, and the third one he died. But for me, he is a person who reached the most because he saved all his men, and he was a true leader. And for me, he's like a really role model. And for me, this connection to him was the most special. And also arriving to the expedition, to the search place on his birthday, and finding his ship on the 100 years of anniversary of his funeral was truly special.
I think it's all, yeah, I think the web, right? The connection, that feeling that you have of being a part of all of that story is just remarkable. That makes sense to me.
And
Um,
if you I don't mind, I would like to mention something because I wrote a journal on this expedition. It's called Shackleton's Very Last Journal, where I wrote a journal that I imagine that he's there with his spirit with us and he's looking at us. And I wrote this journal every single day on the expedition with, so to say, his words as looking at us and talking about us. And there is a podcast, the National Geographic podcast, where I also read 2 days out of this journal. So if someone is interested.
oh, great. Well, I think that Seth is going to post some connections when we're done here for people to follow you and to learn more about you. So that's great. That journal sounds really interesting, and I hope we all get to read it all one day. It sounds really fantastic. Um, I'm also curious, you're heading north into the polar night, and you said you've been doing it for what, 6 years, I think. Um, you're going to be up there for 3 weeks, and I know it's difficult for you to talk to us from the location. Might we be able to invite you back to share with us a little bit about the polar night? Not many people get a chance to go north and experience that total darkness.
I would
Um,
love to. I would love to do that after the journey.
it would be great to learn about the science, but also your personal perspective of being in a place. Does that mean you'll get to sleep a little more because it's going to be so much darkness?
Sleep is always like I sleep after when I return. Sleep is always the
Yeah.
least priority.
Yeah. Okay. I get it. All right. Okay. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer. You're a busy woman and Christmas is coming. Merry Christmas to you. Um, I I just really appreciate you visiting with us today and sharing so much. So thank you so much for doing that. And I do hope you'll come back and see us another time.
Thank you so much for inviting, and I wish you happy holidays and everyone who is watching or will watch later. And it was wonderful that thank you so much that I could share my little journey and endurance expedition.
Thank you, Esther. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you to all who stayed through with the broadcast, but this will be rebroadcast on Facebook. So if you missed it, you'll get to see it in a recorded version. And again, we thank you for attending and we thank you, Esther, for giving your time to us. Stay
Thank you.
well, stay safe, and come back and see us again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.